Hey, live on Facebook. I'm never ready for this. I'm looking at it going live and I'm already getting brain freeze. Okay, we're going to continue with the Never Neverland series. We're on number 4. I skipped Never Say Never because it's not important enough to me. So we've knocked it down to, I think, 9 instead of 10 nevers. So anyway, I just want to get that out of the way. I'm going to do a screen share and begin. Hey, Jair, hallelujah! I don't know, man. It makes my day that you're on here. Okay, so the 4th never. Never say I need you, say I want you. And the reason being is because needs are insatiable. They are what I call a black hole that nobody can fill. I've had some recent conversation with a client based on a relationship that they're in, and a lot of this stuff came up. I was actually able to point them to the series on YouTube so they can get some more information. But this is a common thing that happens with certain behavioral types, or I'd like to say certain brain types. So there's a big difference between needing people and wanting people. And I put it in my book, The 4 People Types. If you want a wife, find a good one. If you need a wife, you'll marry anyone. And that whole want-need orientation sets us up for poor decision making. Even if you're a drug addict, if you want drugs, you'll probably find a way to get some decent drugs. If you need drugs, you'll steal from your grandparents. And so that whole emotional, whether it's, relationships aren't necessarily an addiction, although they are with some people. But in a relationship, it's not the same as an addictive behavior where you're getting a dopamine dump or whatever from a drug. But the principle is the same, that the more you need something, the less apt you are to make good decisions about that something in an effort to get that need met. All right, next slide. Let me see here. Okay. To need is to place the burden of good and fulfilled existence on someone else. So if you're not meeting my needs, then I'm suffering and it's your fault. Human beings, and I'm talking about specifically in a relationship, are not meant to make you happy. They're not, people aren't there so that you won't jump off a bridge. People are there to enjoy life with you and join life with you. Having a relationship where the dependence on your fulfillment, personal goodness, and happiness is based upon what they do or don't do is a setup for utter failure. And a lot of relationships are built, on this principle. I don't know if you're familiar with the movie What About Bob, but it's a great, great film. And what I like about it is it really emphasizes, obviously in an exaggerated sense, the need orientation in the relationship. We don't want need orientation in our relationships because it creates a lot of problems. So need-oriented people types typically have 3 fears. And the 3 fears are, number 1, not being liked, number 2, failure, and number 3, being mischaracterized. And so in the relationship, there's an unconscious effort to make sure that these 3 things these three fears aren't realized in the relationship. And this is what I've come to call the I triangle. I meaning me, it's all about me. So my happiness is based on you liking me. My happiness is based on me not having any failures in my life. My happiness is based upon you not mischaracterizing me. And so it's super important to understand how these things affect our psyche as people. So the need to be liked. This is all about consistent affirmation and praise. Now, there's nothing wrong with getting affirmation, and there's nothing inherently wrong with really needing affirmation. Now, before I go any further on this, there's something else I want to say about this. A marital relationship, or even any important relationship, it could even be a partnership in work or anything like that, it has to have three legs to this stool. And dang it, I didn't put it in the slides here because it just came off the top of my head. But the three-legged stool of a more successful relationship is based upon, number one, requirements, number two, requests, and number three, negotiations. And so, in a relationship, there are requirements that must be met for me to experience emotional health, let's say, in the relationship. So a good example of that is, don't talk down to me, curse me, and say very bad things to me. Like, I wish I never married you, or you stupid bitch, or, things like this. And this happens a lot, trust me. I've done consulting with couples for nearly 30 years. And so that should be a requirement. And if you can't meet that requirement, then pack your bags. And so the problem with people is they have requirements, but they couch them as requests. I may be repeating myself. I'm not sure if I am from a previous video, so bear with me if I am. And so if I'm couching a requirement as a request, because I make it a request, you don't have to do it. You could say, okay, I'll meet that request, or no, I don't want to meet that request. Because a request, by definition, is, would you like to do this for me? But if not, that's fine. And so this is where people get into trouble. They make a request, and then the request isn't fulfilled. And so because it was actually a requirement, there's repercussions for not fulfilling it. And what do they look like? Silent treatment, withholding affection, slamming cabinet doors, whatever. I mean, manipulation, hint dropping, there's different things. In other words, I'm not happy with the fact that you didn't meet my request, so now I'm going to pay you back with some emotional maneuvering that puts you in a position of feeling terrible, in an effort to get you to do what I originally wanted you to do, but lied to you in the fact that I said, you don't have to do it if you don't want to, but I'd like you to do it. That's total nonsense. If it's a request, if I don't want to do it, end of story. Like, you can't manipulate me, you can't roll your eyes, breathe heavy, not talk to me, withhold information, or whatever. But this is what a lot of people do. So if you have an insatiable need for affirmation, praise, strokes, meaningful touch, or anything like that, then you better build it into the relationship and say, this is really important to me, and if this isn't going to happen, then, we've got to maybe do something else. But this is before you get full-on commitment. And so, another need, a need not to fail. So, constant affirmation of successes. This can become troublesome for people. To every time you finish a task or every time you do something, you're looking for some sort of affirmation of the completion or the brevity of how amazing it is or anything like that. What ends up happening is you're putting the burden of your goodness and fulfillment in the relationship on somebody else's affirmation process. If you can't affirm yourself, hey Nicole, good to see you. If you can't affirm yourself, it becomes difficult for needing somebody else to make all those affirmations. So again, you have to build these things in. They need to be understood. So affirmation of agreement. We don't always agree with each other. We don't always agree with what color to paint the family room. We don't always agree with what we want for dinner. We don't always agree with how to feed the dog. And so, needing constant agreement can set yourself up for more problems than you're likely willing to deal with. So you have to understand that, two people have two different brains. We think differently. And because we think differently, there are now differences. It's important to understand that you will have differences. And so in a relationship, the strength of the relationship is typically, when I mean typically, it's the rule. Are there exceptions to the rule? Maybe. But the rule is, love and respect, love and security, deep friendship. So most relationships that have long-term success, it's because they're in deep relationship. They have a fundamental friendship that carries them throughout all the differences, the lack of understanding. I failed to affirm your success yesterday, the need to be liked, so I didn't praise or stroke you enough. We don't take that as, well, if you don't do that, I have no other indications that you care about me. Well, that's because there's other issues. If your only sign that you're cared about is if they praise or stroke you or touch you, then where's the rest of the communication? Do I tell my wife I love her? I do. Not as much as I used to, for sure. But I know I did it every day for at least 10 years because I remember that. It was very important to me. And really because I like that, so we don't see people as they are, we see them as we are. So I was doing that to her thinking she would like it too. But anyway, her language is a little bit different than mine. We learned that through the years. But the point I'm making is, saying I love you and doing I love you are different things. And you got to know which ones need to be happening. But if love is questioned, then it's not being communicated. And if it isn't being communicated, the bigger question is why? And then that's where we want to go. All right, let's get off of that. Need-oriented relationships are exhausting for the affirming partner. So if my needs outweigh your capacity to keep up with them, you're going to be exhausted. And so there's a fine line here between, having a healthy need to be affirmed. Okay, so everybody needs that, and there's a healthy level of that. But a consistency in being affirmed, that can become unhealthy. But the greater question is, why is that happening? Well, if I'm living in a desert, then water becomes increasingly more and more important. So you might be in a desert in the relationship, a desert of communication. And so, getting an I love you or a meaningful touch can be like crawling 6 miles through the desert and coming upon, a little pool of ice water. You're like, da, 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 because you're parched. And so this is why we need to understand in relationships, where are we at as far as our emotional gas in tank? And are we running on fumes, or do we need a fill up? And so getting these things out there is really important. All right. This is rooted in the third never. So this is about receiving your life from your partner versus sharing your life with your partner. I don't want to go over that whole thing again, because we've already talked about that, but you got to understand that this is really important. If you're buddy breathing with your partner, then there's an issue with yourself in that you're not being fulfilled in who you are and in what you do in the world, and where you're going in the world. And then bringing that into a relationship with someone else and then sharing those victories, then if you're empty, if your oxygen tank is empty, then you need somebody else's. If they're running low, you can both die. So it's important that you figure out where you're at in all this. So need-oriented relationships are doomed to fail. So this is my opinion. That if these are too great, if the needs are too great and there's an inability to fulfill the need, the marriage or the relationship will fail. It's the ultimate destination. Need-oriented people are rooted in selfishness. So depending upon how great the need is, because remember, need orientation is an unhealthy interest in the self. They didn't look at me right. They didn't call me back. They didn't tell me I look nice. They didn't. Now, again, there's a healthy level of this. There's a healthy level of this. It's just, the healthy level is found in just common courtesy. You're dressing up, you're putting a lot of energy into looking good for the night. It's common courtesy to say, wow, you clean up well, or whatever. Withholding that information could be coming from other issues. But normal, healthy people, when someone's making an attempt to be special, we recognize it, right? We do that with our children. As we get older, we don't do it as much sometimes. But it's important to understand that there is a healthy level of this, but then there's an unhealthy level. If I have an overly exaggerated need to be affirmed and liked in a relationship, it's one of two reasons. I have extremely low self-esteem, and in which that's nobody's else's really, it's really not anybody else's fault, and it's not anybody else's job to fix that. It's yours. Or the relationship isn't what you think it is. And so you got to figure out where that's at. Both are extremely hard to do. So, talking about this is easy, living it is difficult. And again, depending upon where you're at. Okay, what's next? So, need orientation is a passive form of lust. So, I think you might be wondering what I mean by that. Well, here's what I mean by that. Love says, what can I do for you? Okay? That's, coming from a more unconditional space. That's, I'm coming into a relationship because I want to be a confirmer in the relationship. I want to be a contributor in in the relationship. So I come as a healthy person and contribute some of my strengths, my talents, my time, and all these things to your life. But what does lust say? What can you do for me? And so some people are in a relationship not for what they can bring to the relationship. Hey, Mike, cool, yeah, pick it up later. Appreciate you checking in. So lust says, what can you do for me? So what does that mean? It means some people are in a relationship for what they can consume, not what they can contribute. In other words, oftentimes the relationship for an individual, if you're married young, is a lifeline. My life sucks, so I'll hook up with you and maybe it'll be better. If that's happening, and it happens a lot, trust me, then the relationship is not off to a good start, although you think it is, because, oh my God, you're beautiful, and oh my God, you just saved my life. So that's great, but what happens 5 years later? Those elements are no longer viable. So now you're just stuck with character and these other issues. You know, when the charm wears off, all you've got is character left. If you ain't got character, you ain't got nothing left. And so there's all these different dynamics that play out. You want to make sure you're in the relationship for what you can bring to the relationship. And that the personal emotional needs that you have can't be assigned to anybody other than yourself. And if you need help getting that straightened out and fixed up, then, you know, call somebody and set up some appointments and helping so they can help you understand what these issues may be stemming from, you know, how to overcome them, so forth and so on. So it's important that you're loving in your relationship, not lusting in the relationship. People think the opposite of love is hate, but it isn't. The opposite of love emotionally is lust. It's just the difference between giving and taking. This is why in the Holy Bible, love is often translated charity, because it's turned into really an action word rather than an idea. Why is love called charity? Because love gives, right? And that's the whole point. When we love people, the automatic result of that combination of human brain, caring and loving for another person, is to give to that person, not always expecting to get from that person. And so if both people are loving in the relationship and not lusting, then they outdo one another through that process. I remember a story, this goes way back, so you have to forgive me, I might get it wrong, but it was about this couple that loved each other dearly, and she had extremely long, beautiful hair, and it was really, her identity was in her hair, and the gentleman, it was something else, I can't remember what it was, but he sold something really dear to him to buy a special hairbrush for her, and she sold her hair in an effort to get something for him. And when they both come together, they realize, oh my God, I sacrificed the most important thing in my life for you, and they both had done it. Maybe somebody could text me and tell me what that's all about, where that came from, but it just popped into my head. But it's very important to understand how these dynamics work. So anyway, that's all I'm going to say today. I was going to give it a half an hour because I'm going to be a guest on a podcast today, and I want to get geared up for that. If you have any questions, you know, you can always Facebook message me or whatever. If you're interested in getting your full behavioral analysis completed and spending some time with me, yours truly, on the phone or through Zoom, to walk through your brain type and how your emotions are working, where your self-esteem is at, and all these different things. Super fun, super powerful, and extremely productive. So anyway, that's it. Have a good day, and we will see you later next week. I'm probably going to do some behavioral talks, and then we'll come back to the Never Neverland series to finish that up soon. But either way, I want you to know I'm gonna stay, in front of you here with these videos, in hopes that you can benefit from it. If you like it, share it. It's real important to me, and it helps me get the word out with some of these principles for people that need it, and all that jazz. So anyway, that's it. Have a great day, and we will connect again soon.